Today, I'm talking to two of our academics, Dr. Ben Wellings and Tamara Wilkinson, about Monash's new double degree, the Bachelor of Politics, Philosophy and Economics, and Bachelor of Law honours. Ready to hear from our experts? Let's go. Monash's Bachelor of Politics, Philosophy and Economics and Bachelor of Laws honours are designed for ambitious students who want to gain a deep understanding of the complicated systems that govern societies at local, national and global levels. Why do you think it's valuable for our future change makers to pursue a solid grounding in politics, philosophy, economics and law?
A degree in politics, philosophy and economics is an ideal foundation for anyone who wants to understand the complexities of public life and have a career in public life. Politics will let you know the art of the possible, what can and can't be done in a certain political situation. The economics will help dictate who gets what, when and how, and that feeds into the politics. And the philosophy equips you with all sorts of skills, but not least an understanding of ethics and how to behave ethically and do the right thing in situations that may not be ideal. So all of these are an incredible foundation for anyone who's ambitious to understand the complexities of public life and work within public life.
I have a degree in arts and in laws, and so I know how absolutely vital it is to combine these two areas. I think that something that's really important for every lawyer to understand is how the legislative process works, how our laws are made, and how our policies are formulated. And that's not necessarily something that you're going to gain a deep understanding of with just looking at substantive laws themselves. You get a much better idea of the bigger picture if you broaden your horizons, and I think this degree will really allow students to do that.
Double degrees are a great way to combine your interests and expand your fields of expertise. Why do you think it's valuable to diversify your studies while at university?
Double degrees are really excellent for both instrumental and intellectual reasons. The instrumental is that you end your bachelor studies with 2 degrees, you've kept your options really open. But intellectually, they're really valuable as well. The synergies between the two disciplines and how they interact and the similarities and dissimilarities really encourage creative thought. And that is so important to step out into the workforce with that kind of intellectual capabilities behind you.
I think that there are two sort of lenses you can look at this through. Of course, it's going to help your employment prospects if you are diversified, and we all know that it is a challenging environment at the moment, so anything that students can do to give themselves a competitive edge is going to be fantastic for their future careers. But I also think it gives you the chance and the freedom to pursue perhaps different interests that, as Ben said, may nevertheless combine in really interesting ways. And I think it's not until you actually do look at 2 different areas in depth that you can actually see where those synergies lie and perhaps broaden your own horizons a bit and think about where the future might take you that's outside of either of those perhaps more narrow directions that you might otherwise have gone down.
What are some of the valuable skills students will obtain by engaging with this uniquely multidisciplinary double degree?
The PPE double with law really gives students a structured way to understand and interpret the world around them. And for example, there is so much information and misinformation out there at the moment that affects the way that we behave and the way that we ought to behave, that we need these structured ways of thinking when we analyse all that information to be able to sift one bit of evidence from another and really get to the heart of what is happening and what is best for us and what is best for the people around us and for our community. So the PPE double degree with law will really help students understand the world, but to do so in a structured way in which they can interpret evidence for the common good.
A law degree is always going to give students the ability to reason through problems. It's going to give them the chance to work on how to logically, step by step, think through working out answers to really complex issues. And it's going to help them develop their communication skills, both written and oral. But where I think that students are really going to be able to benefit by combining this degree with the PPE degree is in the intersection of the different ways of thinking that Ben mentioned. So for instance, legal philosophy underlies a huge part of what we do as lawyers, even though you may not actually see that in its sort of day-to-day application. So having that grounding, the economics, of course, also a huge part. I use economic theory in my work all the time, so I think it's going to help get students outside of the law mindset, which is, of course, extremely useful by broadening how they think and how they look at the world.
Can you tell us why professional experience is a priority and what students can expect to gain from work-integrated learning and internships?
Absolutely. So in the law faculty now, we're really proud of the fact that we actually are the first law school in Australia to have a clinical legal education guarantee. And what that means for our students is that any student who wants to have work experience in a practical legal setting is going to be able to get that during their degree, which is so incredibly valuable. Doing practical legal education is valuable for a whole range of reasons. Of course, it helps with your professional networks. It's opening up opportunities for your future career, but it's also teaching you about how the law applies in practical community-based settings, as well as, so you can get involved in governmental work, you can get involved in our startup clinic. There are so many different opportunities that are available outside of what we perhaps think of as traditional clinical legal education. And that means that students are really coming into this degree at the best time because they're going to be able to find a work experience opportunity that suits their interests. And I think that's just fantastic. And one of the best things about our clinical legal education guarantee is that it provides students, regardless of their social or economic background, a pathway into the law, which hasn't always been the case. So we're really proud of our guarantee and we hope that students absolutely make the most of it.
Professional experience is so important for students. And this is because you get to see how all the things that you've been learning about in the lecture theatres, in the workshop rooms, in the tutorials with your professors actually are applied every day in a workplace. So we, for example, encourage our students to apply for the Victorian Parliamentary Internship. We open this every year, and this means that students who are successfully inducted into the programme get to work with a Member of Parliament at Spring Street on a project that Member of Parliament is working on, very current, absolutely up to date, and then you get to use all those skills that you've been developing in that time at university in the workplace. And so what it means is that when you finish your degree, you can come out and you can say to a prospective employer, not only do I know this stuff, I've already used it, I can already do it.
Let's talk travel. The PPE in Law double degree empowers students to amplify their global perspectives through internships, field trips and exchanges. Why is it important for ambitious students who want to create real change to gain international experiences?
Given the increasing connection that's happening in the world today, lawyers are now more than ever being asked to solve complex transnational problems. We're no longer bounded by the borders of the countries we live in. So students undertaking a law degree at Monash have the opportunity to study in one of our international campuses. We have a campus in Malaysia and we have a campus in Italy in Prato. So I think that having the opportunity for our students to study overseas at one of our campuses really gives them an opportunity to broaden their worldview and benefit from the wealth of experiences that can come from living internationally, studying internationally, and working internationally. And I think that that's only going to help them in their future career opportunities. I know that I lived overseas for several years and it's an experience I wouldn't change for the world.
It's really important for students to have an international perspective because we exist at a very interesting moment politically right now. And that is that the interconnectedness and the globalisation that we've grown up with or got used to is under strain. And in some areas that interconnection is still strong, in other areas it is weakening. The thing is that the problems that our students and graduates will be asked to resolve are the solutions of these are only to be found at the intersection between the international and the national levels. So students need to be fluent in both those. And the PPE has a bespoke study tour, a multi-destination study tour, which will take students to two Indo-Pacific countries. And we will look at very practical problems to do with economics and politics and all the philosophical implications of those. And again, we do that in a very real world setting. We're taking the students out of the classroom and saying, these ideas that you've got are really valuable, now apply them in this real world international setting.
What kinds of careers can PPE and law students expect to enter when they graduate?
There are so many careers that a student could go into coming out of this degree. The sky's really the limit. You have, of course, the traditional legal pathways: barrister, solicitor, in-house legal counsel at private companies. And of course, you can also go into policy making, areas of government, public service. There's just so many pathways that can be followed. I in particular have a number of students who've gone down the path of accounting, banking, business management, and I think that those pathways will really tailor particularly well with this double degree. Of course, I used my double degree, arts law, to go into academia, so education is another really good option that many students might be interested in pursuing. There is a huge range of opportunities for students coming out of this degree.
There are lots of careers for PPE graduates: politics and government, working for multinational corporations, working for non-governmental organisations, journalism, teaching. The point about the PPE degree is, though, that the specialisations really allow students to develop deep knowledge of one of the areas that they're particularly interested in, as well as combine the three creatively. So once you've decided on that and you start going down that particular path, that opens up all sorts of possibilities for you.
And finally, what advice would you give to any incoming PPE and law students looking to make the most out of the university experience?
I think that my advice to any student would be to take advantage of the opportunities that you have in your degree. There are so many provided at Monash and provided through this double degree. And I think even though things might seem intimidating, they might seem like something you wouldn't necessarily have thought you'd be interested in, give it a go. You don't have anything to lose.
I think my main advice would be to develop and sustain networks. And these can be professional networks, but also peer networks, because these are the people who are going to help you get the jobs when you come out of your degree. You know, we talk about the strength of weak ties, and this idea means that it's not necessarily someone you know closely that's going to help you, but it's the contacts that you've made along the way. So in the PPE degree, we deliberately put students in front of people from government, people from business, people from public life, and we encourage students to take up the opportunities that those people are offering, but also develop those strong peer networks that last not just university but also after university, because these networks sustain you as well as you sustaining them. So they're really important. So that's my main piece of advice.